140 world leaders are expected to reach New York for the 78th session of United Nations General Assembly. The leaders have a lot on their plates to discuss, but there are more disagreements to wade through. Now, these are divided lines not only over what is most important to talk about, but also what the remedies should be. So why should you care? Well, we are living in a multipolar world, and these issues are most likely to affect you and me. And to tell us more about this, we are being joined by Baswati Mukherjee. She is the former ambassador of India to the Netherlands. Welcome to the broadcast, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Now, I have a very short question for you. The United Nations, is it looking united to you?
It is neither looking united and nor does it reflect the power structure of the present day and time, which we saw so beautifully reflected in the recently concluded G20 summit in Delhi. The G20, on the other hand, is a group of emerging powers and established powers and reflects actually the new power lines which have developed and which are not reflected anymore in the UN. And if you look at the leaders who have landed up, among the 140 leaders, you have only one representative from the UN Security Council, that's President Biden, who doesn't have far to travel from Washington to New York. And for the others, not a single other P5 leader has come. On the other hand, you do have President Vladimir. He has an unfortunate name which is similar to his nemesis, President Putin, Zelensky. He is there, and he is going to make sure that the world hears what's happening on Ukraine. Therefore, if you think that it's going to be a peaceful, calm UN General Assembly, I do not think so. The Africans have already made it clear, they are there in strength, that they are going to demand a much greater share in the power structure of the UN. And why not? After all, it was Indian government and our Prime Minister that made sure that the African Union became a permanent member of the G20, which is now G20 plus one. So if you could do it in the G20, then why can they not be given more power in the UN, which they don't have? Ananya.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned the G20, because there is a lot to discuss in New York: the war in Ukraine, global cost of living crisis, climate change. And these were themes, recurring themes rather, discussed at the New Delhi G20 summit as well. The fact that a joint declaration was produced last week, does that give you any hope for this year's UNGA?
But absolutely. What we did in Delhi was almost like magic, because we were able to produce consensus 8 paragraphs on the global political situation, including Ukraine, when the permanent members of the Security Council, who are quarreling among themselves, have not been able to find any consensus whatsoever on what's happening in Ukraine. We were able to do that here in Delhi. So I think that that also shows that emerging powers like India have a very important role to play in maintaining international peace and security if we were given a chance to do so. But unfortunately, we are out of the Security Council. We came back to the Security Council as a non-permanent member after a gap of 21 years, and maybe it will be another 21 years before we get back to the Security Council as a non-permanent member. That is actually, as I said, Ananya, the unfair and imperfect power balance in the UN today, which is why I said that the Africans are demanding a much greater share of the pie. And why not? There is not a single African in the UN Security Council permanent membership. There is no Arab. There is no Latin American. India is not there. Japan is not there. Germany is not there. So it's not a good power balance that they have presently among the P5 and the Security Council. And the UN General Assembly, in a way, is helpless, because even if they reform the UN Security Council, under the rules of procedure, every single P5 country has to agree. Even if one P5 country vetoes that resolution, you cannot reform the UN Security Council.
Right. Ambassador Mukherjee, you make a very fair point. Clearly, the partners that are there on the table when it comes to the war in Ukraine are not able to wade through the differences. So maybe it's time we bring partners like India who could come to some sort of consensus, if not overall. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about. The Ukrainian president, called the G20 New Delhi Declaration nothing to be proud of. I'm quoting him here. So now we're also expecting him to be present in New York, and we're also hearing Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is going to be present. Are you expecting anything concrete when it comes to the war?
It was Henry Kissinger who said, Ananya, that for a peace settlement to be perfect, it should be totally unsatisfactory to both sides, but not unsatisfactory enough for any one side to seek to reverse it. That is exactly the case with the New Delhi Declaration, which had something to offer both sides, and it was a balance. So if Zelensky thinks it was not perfect, the Russians have the same perspective. But it was a balance of interests, and that's why everybody agreed.
Right. Let's shift our focus a little. During the G20 summit, we heard the term Global South in almost every address. Now, in literal terms, for our viewers to know, it refers to the countries in the southern hemisphere, especially those that are developing and underdeveloped. What kind of change do you think the UN is capable of when it comes to the Global South?
The Global South, Ananya, refers to countries not necessarily south of the equator, but countries that have a low GDP but huge potential for economic development. Today, the African continent is poised for takeoff. It offers the markets and the resources required for a faltering Western economy to come out of the post-pandemic havoc. So therefore, the Africans who understand now very clearly that the prosperity of the West is contingent upon the development of Africa is demanding a fairer share in decision making, which affects them as much as it affects the West. And definitely this has to be something that has to be sorted out, whether it is in the present power structure of the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank, IMF, etc., the P5, or elsewhere. And again, as I said earlier, Ananya, the Indian government and Prime Minister Modi led from the front when, by consulting each G20 member, we were able to give the African Union their seat at the high table right at the beginning of the summit when we began in New Delhi. And that is something that the Africans are grateful for, and that is something that the Africans consider to be a very positive signal, because after all, the G7 is part of the G20, and so they're demanding the same from the UN General Assembly, Ananya.
Right, Ambassador, before we wrap up this discussion, an organization like the United Nations has faced criticism of not being inclusive. You have in fact spoken in length about this in this discussion as well. You know, the Indian Foreign Minister, funnily enough, compared the UN to a university special bus, where whoever came and sat first felt entitled that the seat only belongs to him or her. Do you agree with this assessment?
Yes, well, the Indian Foreign Minister and myself have taken the university special to Delhi University many times. So I can agree with him that what basically our Foreign Minister was trying to say is that it was a free-for-all post-World War II. The victors got it all, and therefore the power structure today of the UN, unlike the G20, reflects the victorious powers of World War II. That is why Japan is not there. That is why Germany is not there. And India is not there because we refused to take China's vacant seat when it was offered to us by the American president. So had we taken the Chinese vacant seat, we would have been a permanent member, but we are not there. And today we are faced with a situation where even if every other P5 and every other P5 endorses India's candidature, the Chinese have said that they will veto our candidature. So that is where we are. It is not an inclusive UN. It is not an inclusive Security Council.
Thank you so much for speaking with us and getting us all those insights. Of course, you'll be tracking what happens in New Delhi in the past next days.
Thank you very much, Ananya.